Jessica Carter clenched her boarding pass in her hand as flight attendant Emily Stevens stood before her, her cold voice ringing through the cabin. "Ma'am, we need this seat for another passenger." First class fell silent. Jessica, the formidable CEO of Pinnacle Investments, had just closed a $120 million deal with SkyWest Airlines, yet the airline was now asking her to move to economy. As two security officers approached, tasers at their sides, Jessica's phone buzzed. The first $25 million payment has just cleared. Coolly, she tapped Revert Transaction. Jessica Carter, the powerful CEO of Pinnacle Investments, settled into the spacious, comfortable first-class seat aboard her SkyWest flight and let out a long, quiet breath. Today was critically important. In a few hours, she would sign a $120 million investment agreement with SkyWest, opening a new chapter in their long-term partnership. She adjusted her dark Armani blazer and glanced at the Cartier watch on her wrist. She planned to use the flight to review her presentation one last time. But her calm was short-lived. A figure in a Navy uniform approached from the front of the cabin, walking with confident, almost icy steps. Jessica looked up and recognized Chief Flight Attendant Emily Stevens, her professional smile barely masking the sternness in her eyes. "Excuse me, ma'am," Emily said politely, but without warmth. "May I see your boarding pass again?" Jessica's brow furrowed as she noticed the difference between Emily's attitude toward her and the friendly manner shown to the white passengers nearby. Staying composed, she pulled up her e-ticket on her phone. "Of course," she replied evenly. "I'm Jessica Carter, seat 2A. I booked this weeks ago." Emily stared at the screen longer than necessary, then gave Jessica an impolite once-over. "I'll need photo ID for verification," she said, her tone deliberately drawing the attention of nearby passengers. Curious, suspicious glances converged on Jessica. She took a deep breath, maintained her polite smile, and handed over her driver's license and corporate ID. Emily studied the documents without softening her expression. Each second felt heavier than the last. Jessica knew this was no routine check. "Is there a problem?" Jessica finally asked. Emily's brow tightened, and she flashed a faint, inscrutable smirk. "We need to verify a few more details, Miss Carter," she said flatly. "There are some issues with your ticket." Inside, Jessica's calm veneer cracked, her irritation rising. The air around her seemed to freeze as whispers and stares swirled. She understood in that moment this was far more than a minor mix-up. It was deeper, more serious, and she would not let anyone trample her dignity without consequence. Watching Emily's back as she strode toward the galley, Jessica silently vowed, whatever happened next, anyone who disrespected her would be held accountable. As Jessica's eyes followed Emily Stevens's mysterious figure as she strode toward the galley, she had no way of knowing that an icy, calculated plot was unfolding against her there. In the aircraft galley, the faint glow from the small overhead lights carved out a discreet, almost secretive space, worlds away from the opulent first-class cabin. Bradley Thompson, SkyWest Airlines Vice President of Operations, stood waiting in a sharp black suit, his impatience etched into every tense line of his jaw. Known throughout the executive ranks for his arrogance and iron-fisted style, Bradley harbored deep-seated prejudices against anyone he saw as other. When Emily entered, she immediately felt the chill in Bradley's piercing gaze. "How's it going?" Bradley barked, foregoing any pretense of courtesy. Emily hesitated, lowering her voice. "I've checked her documents. They're all in order. Jessica Carter really is the CEO of Pinnacle Investments. Her booking is legitimate, and she has every verification." Bradley's brow darkened. He cast a disdainful glance toward the first-class cabin. "I don't care who she is." he growled just loudly enough for Emily to hear. "Richard Harris called me from the airport. He's furious about being bumped to economy. You know how important Harris is to us. Get that woman out of seat 2A. Now." Emily's face flickered with hesitation. The request clearly made her uncomfortable. "But Miss Carter is a high-profile client, sir. This could have serious repercussions if—" Bradley cut her off with a harsher edge. "Emily, this isn't a request, it's an order. Richard Harris is a longtime VIP and a personal golf buddy. If we don't handle this to his satisfaction, what do you think will happen to our jobs? Find any excuse. System glitch, duplicate booking, whatever you want, but do it fast." Bradley's eyes blazed with ruthless resolve and entitlement. To him, Jessica Carter, no matter how powerful, was merely an inconvenience on his path to securing personal favors. His ingrained biases made it all too easy to justify booting her from her lavish seat. Emily pressed her lips together and bowed her head in reluctant agreement. "Yes, Mr. Thompson, I'll take care of it." Bradley nodded, a cold, satisfied smile curling at his lips as he reveled in the absolute power he wielded. As Emily turned to head back to the cabin, Bradley stole one more glance at Jessica. His smile turned even crueler. "She needs to know her place," he muttered. "Not everyone deserves the best seat on the plane." Back in first class, Jessica fought to maintain her composure, but a powerful sense of unease gripped her. This was no ordinary mix-up. Deep down, she knew she would never allow herself to be victimized, especially not by someone as contemptuous as Bradley Thompson. Emily returned to the cabin, her steps heavy with the invisible weight of Bradley Thompson's order. Jessica's eyes locked onto her immediately, and a sharp alarm bell rang in her gut. In Emily's hand was a small tablet, her expression more rigid than before. Nothing like the warm courtesy she'd shown other passengers. "Miss Carter," Emily began, her voice raised just enough to draw the attention of the entire first-class cabin. "I'm sorry, but it appears there's been a seat assignment conflict. I'm going to have to ask you to move to economy at the back." The atmosphere went tense in an instant. Every other sound seemed to vanish, leaving only Emily's cold words echoing around them. Curious and surprised glances converged on Jessica, creating a pressurized bubble of discomfort. Jessica met Emily's gaze, calm on the surface but burning with justified anger beneath it. "I'm afraid that's not possible," she said, her tone firm but measured. "I booked this seat legally and paid in full weeks ago. I'm sure you can find a better solution than forcing me out of mine." Emily took a step back at Jessica's unexpectedly strong response, but quickly recovered her composure. "Ma'am, I'm simply following company procedure. Please cooperate so we don't inconvenience the other passengers." Jessica shook her head decisively, her eyes sharp yet steady. Each word she spoke rang out with dignity. "I cannot agree to this. This isn't just any seat, it's the right of a confirmed passenger. If there's an issue, you need to fix it without penalizing me." As tensions flared, a haughty voice cut through from the cabin door. Richard Harris, the white VIP in the designer suit, stood there, looking at Jessica with irritation and contempt. "Honestly, I don't understand why you're making such a fuss," he sneered. "Some people just don't know their place." Jessica felt her blood boil, but she refused to react on impulse. She turned back to Emily and stated firmly, "Again, I will not budge. If there's a problem, speak to your supervisor." Emily glanced toward the rear of the cabin, where Bradley watched surreptitiously with a tense expression. He nodded almost imperceptibly, and two burly security officers in Navy uniforms, radios at their belts, tasers at the ready, strode threateningly toward Jessica. One of them rested a hand on his stun gun in a silent but chilling warning. "Ms. Carter," the taller guard said in a stern voice, his gaze icy with authority, "we must ask you to comply immediately. If you refuse to move, we will have to use stronger measures." The cabin's hush cracked as passengers murmured, and some even raised phones to record the scene. Jessica realized that this had become far more than a simple dispute. If she resisted further, she could be forcibly removed and risk serious damage to her reputation and to Pinnacle investments. Yet accepting this public humiliation and injustice was equally intolerable. She scanned the cabin, aware of every curious gaze. Shame and anger surged within her, but above all, she knew her responsibility. This fight needed to be taken up on her own terms, at a time and place she controlled. She inhaled deeply, then rose slowly to her feet, fixing Emily with a steady stare before turning her gaze to Bradley at the back of the cabin. Her voice carried clearly for all to hear. "I will move only under duress, and I do not consent to this action. You'd best remember what you've done here today." For a moment, Bradley's triumphant smile flickered with uncertainty, but he swiftly dismissed it, his cold grin returning. Jessica walked out of her seat with proud posture, flanked by the two guards, leaving behind a mix of sympathetic, curious looks and the satisfied smirks of Bradley and Richard Harris. But Jessica knew this battle was only just beginning, and she would never forget what had happened today. Jessica stepped down into the economy cabin, each footfall heavy with all the injustice and humiliation she had just endured. The two security officers halted at the back of the cabin and motioned for her to occupy the narrow middle seat in row 34. Reluctantly, she squeezed past the aisle passenger, who barely glanced at her with thinly veiled disapproval. Settling into the cramped seat, she immediately felt the suffocating tightness of economy class, a stark contrast to the spacious comfort of first class. Before she could collect herself, Jessica realized her predicament here was far more than a mere inconvenience. Bradley Thompson hadn't stopped at relegating her from first class. He intended to turn this flight into a prolonged nightmare, sending a clear message. Jessica Carter, no matter how powerful, could easily be disregarded and manipulated at his whim. Just minutes after takeoff, Jessica opened her laptop, hoping to use the flight time to review her presentation for the SkyWest meeting. But the economy class Wi-Fi was so weak she couldn't load a single email. She frowned and tried again and again in vain, each failed attempt chipping away at her patience. She pressed the call button, and nearly 10 minutes later a young flight attendant appeared, barely masking her indifference. "Can I help you?" she asked in a flat tone. "My Wi-Fi isn't working," Jessica explained. "Could you check it for me?" The attendant shrugged. "Sorry, the signal back here is always this weak. If you need better connectivity, you might consider upgrading next time." Jessica froze at the deliberately provocative remark. She recognized this was no accident. It was part of Bradley's scheme to make her journey as difficult as possible. The cabin's weak air conditioning did little to cool the mounting heat. Jessica reached up to adjust her personal vent, but it seemed broken, unresponsive. She felt a bead of sweat trace down her temple, and noticed the other passengers shifting uncomfortably too, yet no one dared speak up. "May I have some water, please?" she asked politely when the attendant passed by again. A few minutes later, the attendant returned with a half-filled cup of water. Jessica eyed it skeptically but said nothing. Any complaint now could be twisted by Bradley to portray her as uncooperative. For the more than 2-hour flight, Jessica was neither able to work nor relax. Her legs pressed against the seat in front, her arms pinned uncomfortably in the confined space. Every attempt to read her documents was thwarted by the unreliable Wi-Fi and constant laptop errors. As the plane began its descent, Jessica checked her phone for her schedule and upcoming meeting. A new notification made her heart tighten with anxiety. Her luggage, containing all her files, presentation materials, and her meeting attire, had been sent to the wrong city. It was unmistakable this wasn't a random mishap, but another deliberate move in Bradley Thompson's ongoing retaliation. Anger surged through her, but she fought to remain composed. Bradley clearly intended to make every aspect of her trip a series of setbacks, proving that he held all the power. His message was clear. He wanted her to feel small, powerless, and ready to give up. But Bradley had made a grave mistake. He didn't understand that Jessica Carter was not one to surrender to hardship or injustice. His attempts to obstruct her would only strengthen her resolve. Quietly, she closed her laptop, inhaled deeply, and reminded herself. Bradley had started this battle, and she would be the one to finish it. As soon as the plane touched down on the runway, Jessica powered on her phone and was immediately bombarded by a flood of notifications. She startled, sensing that what awaited her was anything but simple. Scanning the screen, she saw dozens of missed calls, hundreds of texts, and thousands of social media mentions. A few seats away, a young passenger rose to her feet, phone in hand, still recording. She offered Jessica a sympathetic smile. "I'm so sorry for what you went through," the young woman said softly, "but I promise you, people won't stay silent about this." Jessica managed only an appreciative nod as the woman moved on. Now she understood why her phone was erupting. Fellow passengers had captured the entire ordeal, from her forced removal from first class to Emily's rude, insulting behavior, to the threatening approach of the two security officers. Short video clips of Jessica being marched down the aisle in humiliation had gone viral across every platform. It wasn't just Jessica. Millions online were outraged by the blatant injustice. In under an hour, Justice for Jessica shot to the top of Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram trending lists. Videos and photos of the incident spread like wildfire, accompanied by thousands of angry comments. On social media, people began digging into SkyWest's past incidents of discrimination. Bradley Thompson, once hidden behind the scenes, suddenly became the focus of a fierce public backlash. Outrage peaked when netizens revealed a suspicious connection. Richard Harris, the man who took Jessica's seat, wasn't just any VIP passenger. He was Bradley's longtime golf buddy, an exclusive club insider known for publicly belittling people of color on numerous occasions. That revelation was the final straw. Major news outlets reached out to verify the story and quickly ran sensational headlines like, "Prominent black female CEO forcibly removed from first class to accommodate white VIP." Those words, alongside hashtag Justice for Jessica, became a media nightmare for SkyWest Airlines. The airline's PR team scrambled to respond to the growing wave of criticism, but couldn't keep up. Back at headquarters, Bradley Thompson sat in his sprawling corner office, pale and tense. He clicked frantically at his computer, futilely trying to stem the tide of outrage. Images of Jessica's determined, unbowed expression had become the symbol of resistance against injustice and racism. Bradley slammed his phone down after calling PR. "How did this even happen? I told you to handle it quietly. You need to put this out immediately before it spins completely out of control." But it was already too late. Social media had turned this into a powerful movement. Celebrities, politicians, and community leaders were voicing their support for Jessica and calling for a boycott of SkyWest. When Jessica finally stepped off the plane, she was met with waves of applause and cheers from onlookers in the terminal. A mix of surprise and gratitude washed over her. She realized she was no longer alone, and that the responsibility on her shoulders was greater than ever. In that moment, she resolved to fight not just for herself, but for the countless others who had endured similar injustices. A new determination settled in her heart. Bradley Thompson and SkyWest Airlines would be held accountable. Jessica would see to it, no matter how challenging the journey ahead. As Jessica stepped out of the taxi in front of SkyWest Airlines headquarters, she realized her fight didn't end with the incident on the plane. The gleaming glass tower reflected the bright sun, but to Jessica, its proud facade felt oddly cold today. She drew a steadying breath and walked up the polished marble steps toward the main entrance. The moment she entered the grand lobby, a uniformed security officer approached, holding up his hand to stop her, his expression suspicious. "Excuse me, ma'am. Where are you headed?" he asked curtly, eyes scanning her outfit and demeanor as if sizing up a suspect. Jessica felt that familiar sting of injustice, but kept her composure. "I'm Jessica Carter, CEO of Pinnacle Investments. I have a meeting with SkyWest's executive team at 2 p.m. All the details have been confirmed." The guard's skepticism didn't waver. He frowned deeper. "I haven't received any notice of your appointment. Please show me your ID so we can verify." Jessica patiently handed over her ID card and business card. The officer examined them deliberately, repeatedly glancing up at her with doubt. He motioned for a colleague, whispering something covertly. Once again, Jessica's dignity was being tested. As she waited, well-dressed white guests in designer suits streamed past, warmly greeted and escorted straight to the boardroom without a hitch. The contrast was painfully blatant, and Jessica felt deeply affronted. After nearly 15 minutes with no progress, Jessica spoke up firmly. "I need to see whoever is in charge right now. I cannot wait any longer. This is a formally scheduled, important meeting. If you continue to delay me, I will consider it an obstruction and notify my lawyer." The guard stiffened at her authoritative tone. Reluctantly, he lifted his radio and called the senior office. Moments later, a private elevator doors opened to reveal a middle-aged man in a tailored gray suit, his face tense and uneasy. It was Walter Kingston, SkyWest's CEO. Walter hurried over, forcing a smile that couldn't hide his worry over the serious fallout from the flight incident. "Ms. Carter, I sincerely apologize for what happened," he said, extending his hand awkwardly to shake hers and ease the lobby's tension. "I had no idea it would escalate like this. Unfortunately, our staff sometimes make mistakes." Jessica shook his hand but remained silent, her icy gaze sending a chill through Walter. He quickly waved the security officers aside. "Let Ms. Carter through immediately. I don't want any more incidents." He spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear, projecting authority to mask his embarrassment. But Jessica knew it was all for show. Behind his calm facade, Walter was shaking at the prospect of a devastating public scandal. As the two stepped into the private elevator, Walter lowered his voice to a pleading whisper. "Please understand. This was just a small misunderstanding caused by a few unprofessional individuals. SkyWest does not condone discrimination. We're prepared to fully compensate you for the inconvenience." Jessica met his eyes, sharp and resolute. "Mr. Kingston, I don't believe this was merely a small misunderstanding. What I experienced today, and what I just witnessed here, only proves that the problem runs deep in SkyWest's culture. I'm not here for personal compensation. I want to ensure no one else goes through this again." Walter's face paled at her unwavering stance. He realized this crisis had spiraled far beyond his control, and that his friend Bradley Thompson had put him in an impossible position. He tried to regain his composure, voice trembling with concern. I promise we will address this thoroughly. Please give SkyWest a chance to make things right." Jessica said nothing, her gaze fixed on the elevator floor indicator rising steadily. Inside her, her determination burned brighter than ever. This was no longer just a personal battle. She understood that her responsibility now was to expose and eradicate the deep-rooted injustices that had festered at SkyWest Airlines for far too long. The doors to the large boardroom swung open softly, but Jessica could feel the tension in every SkyWest board member's gaze as she entered. Walter Kingston hurried to pull out a chair for her at the head of the table, doing his utmost to appear courteous and diffuse the stifling atmosphere in the sleek, glass-walled room. Jessica said nothing as she sat, her eyes scanning the faces concealing their unease. Across from her sat Bradley Thompson, deliberately avoiding her gaze and pretending to study the documents before him. But Jessica's stare was like a blade, cutting through his facade of confidence. Walter began, his voice trembling slightly. "On behalf of SkyWest Airlines, I extend our deepest apologies to you, Ms. Carter, and to Pinnacle Investments for the regrettable incident. We hope to resolve this matter swiftly so our planned partnership can proceed." The other board members nodded in agreement, hoping Jessica would let the matter rest. Bradley finally looked up, forcing a polite smile and adding arrogantly, "Surely this minor incident won't derail our investment plans. Let's not allow a personal misunderstanding to harm our mutual interests." Jessica met Bradley's eyes, pausing for a moment before speaking in a clear, authoritative voice. "Mr. Thompson, it's unfortunate you view these serious events as a personal misunderstanding. I'm afraid you still don't grasp the gravity of the issue." She reached into her portfolio and placed a report on the table decisively, her gaze locked on Bradley. "I am the woman your staff forcibly removed from first class on that flight. I am the person your security officers threatened in front of hundreds of passengers, and I am the individual who endured public humiliation in this very lobby less than an hour ago." The room fell into stunned silence. The board members exchanged alarmed glances, and Walter's face drained of color. Bradley opened his mouth to speak, but Jessica raised a hand to stop him. "I'm not finished, Mr. Thompson. I'm not here for empty apologies, nor do I intend for this to blow over as you seem to assume." She signaled the attorney beside her, who passed her a document. Jessica placed it before them and continued firmly, "In the presence of legal counsel and media representatives, I hereby announce that Pinnacle Investments is immediately freezing the previously agreed-upon $25 million investment. This freeze will remain in effect until a transparent, independent investigation into systemic racial discrimination within SkyWest Airlines yields clear results." Her declaration hit the room like a thunderbolt. Walter sat paralyzed, and Bradley's face flushed with anger, his fists clenched at his sides. Bradley finally erupted, his voice shaking with outrage. "What are you doing, Carter? This is an outrageous retaliation. You can't jeopardize the financial futures of both our companies over this nonsense." Jessica remained seated, staring him down calmly. "Mr. Thompson, you are the one jeopardizing SkyWest's future. What you orchestrated was not a misunderstanding, but a deliberate act of racial discrimination. The evidence before you proves this is not an isolated incident but a cultural problem that starts with you." Bradley fell silent, his color gone, knowing she spoke nothing but the truth. Jessica's eyes bore into him, a direct challenge issuing from her unwavering gaze. Walter rushed in, his voice trembling with desperation. We pledge full cooperation with Pinnacle to address this. Please give us time." Jessica shook her head firmly, cutting him off. There's no time left for empty promises, Mr. Kingston. You've had ample opportunity to prove integrity and fairness, yet you've chosen to condone wrongdoing. SkyWest Airlines must now be held accountable. She stood, adjusted her blazer with dignity and resolve, and paused before leaving the room. She looked each board member in the eye, ending with a resolute declaration. Pinnacle Investments stands for justice and fairness. Rest assured, this will not pass quietly. The boardroom doors closed behind Jessica, but her words lingered, etched in horror on every SkyWest board member's face, especially Bradley Thompson's, as he confronted the severe consequences he had set in motion. The moment the boardroom doors clicked shut behind Jessica, Bradley Thompson smacked his fist down on the table, startling every board member. His eyes burned red with rage, his face twisted by a deep, hateful fury unlike anything they'd ever seen. Bradley could not tolerate the humiliation Jessica had just inflicted on him in front of SkyWest's entire leadership team. Walter Kingston, anxious, leaned toward Bradley in an attempt to calm him. "Bradley, we need to stay calm and find a reasonable solution. We can't let things spiral further." But Bradley heard nothing, consumed by his fury and wounded pride. He ground his teeth, then sprang to his feet and snarled, "There's no way I'll let her walk away with this victory. Who does she think she is? We'll show the world the real Jessica Carter and Pinnacle Investments." That very evening, Bradley convened a covert meeting with his media advisors. In a private conference room at SkyWest headquarters, he outlined a carefully calculated smear campaign designed to destroy Jessica's reputation and that of Pinnacle. Morality no longer factored in. Bradley was singularly focused on taking her down at any cost. Within days, sensational headlines began appearing in newspapers both large and small. Black female CEO exploits racial issue to manipulate financial markets. False, distorted stories spread rapidly, accusing Jessica of leveraging the incident purely to pressure SkyWest into unreasonable financial concessions. Bradley tapped his network of exclusive club friends and prestigious investment groups to seed malicious, baseless rumors portraying Jessica as dishonest, scheming, and manipulative. On social media, a new wave of backlash was unleashed, this time squarely aimed at Jessica. Anonymous accounts, secretly funded by Bradley and his close associates, churned out defamatory posts accusing her of playing the race card for profit. New hashtags trended wildly. Expose Jessica Carter, her race card for profit. Jessica now faced unprecedented pressure. Her phone buzzed nonstop with threatening calls and messages from extremists galvanized by Bradley's smear campaign. Her home address was leaked online, and she received serious death threats from radical bigots. The situation escalated when Pinnacle's major partners and investors demanded explanations for these alarming rumors. Pinnacle's stock plummeted, forcing Jessica's executive team into back-to-back emergency meetings to stem the damage of this vicious media attack. But Jessica knew exactly who was behind it all. She understood that Bradley Thompson wasn't just retaliating against her personally, he was sending a warning to anyone who dared speak out against SkyWest. It was a ruthless, calculated tactic designed to paint her as the villain in the public eye. During those grueling days, Jessica refused to fold. She summoned her legal and PR teams to craft a comprehensive counter-strategy. Standing before her board in an emergency meeting, she declared decisively, "I know we are facing a deliberate campaign to destroy not only my personal reputation, but also Pinnacle Investments' standing. But truth is the strongest weapon. We will confront this head-on, present all the evidence, and hold SkyWest and Bradley Thompson accountable for their wrongdoing." In response to her powerful statement, her team sprang into action. Lawyers gathered proof of Bradley's direct involvement in the smear. Tech experts traced the origins of the defamatory posts, preparing a detailed legal dossier to take SkyWest and Bradley Thompson to court. Despite the mounting pressure, Jessica remained resolute. She knew this was the moment to stand firm, not only for herself, but for everyone who had been oppressed and demeaned by entrenched power and prejudice. Meanwhile, Bradley sat in his private office, a cold smile on his lips as he watched the chaos unfold in the media. He took grim satisfaction in his malicious campaign, convinced Jessica would finally buckle under the pressure. But Bradley had gravely underestimated Jessica Carter's strength. His smear campaign not only failed to break her resolve, it ignited a fierce, all-out counteroffensive that would expose every dark secret Bradley had worked for years to conceal. While Bradley Thompson was gloating over the fierce online backlash against Jessica, he had no idea she'd quietly set in motion a tightly orchestrated, deliberate counterstrike. Jessica understood that to expose the true face of Bradley and SkyWest Airlines, she needed clear, irrefutable evidence. She began by reaching out to someone who had confronted her on the plane, Emily Stevens. A few days later, at a small cafe tucked away on a quiet street corner, Jessica waited in the shadows. Emily arrived looking anxious, her eyes darting around before she sat down across from Jessica. The air between them was tense at first, but Jessica broke the ice with a sincere tone. "I know this must be difficult for you, Emily, but I'm not here to blame you. I just need the truth." Emily hesitated, her eyes red, and whispered, "I'm so sorry for what happened, Miss Carter. I had no choice. Bradley Thompson forced me. He threatened to fire me if I didn't follow his orders." Jessica leaned in, her voice calm and empathetic. "Emily, I understand your situation. The most important thing now is that we uncover the whole story. Bradley can't keep intimidating and manipulating people like this." Emily nodded and pulled a small USB drive from her purse, placing it on the table. "I recorded everything Thompson said to me after the incident. He made me lie to the media, claim you were the agitator, exploiting the situation for personal gain." Jessica gently took the USB, relief and resolve washing over her. Emily looked up earnestly. "But Ms. Carter, it doesn't stop there. I know he's done the same things before to other employees. I hope you can find them. They'll help you expose Bradley's full history." Jessica gripped the USB gratefully. "Thank you, Emily. You did the right thing." Armed with this crucial testimony, Jessica immediately activated her legal and investigative teams, tracking down former SkyWest employees. Soon, confidential files and witness statements flooded her office, each detailing years of systemic racial discrimination and abuse of power by Bradley. Jessica shuddered as she reviewed each account. Marcus Hall, a former black senior manager, had filed a report describing how Bradley blocked his promotion, claiming he didn't fit SkyWest's brand image. Julie Chen, a former Asian HR associate, revealed Bradley pressured her to quietly reject minority candidates, arguing, "Our VIPs prefer familiar faces." These mounting pieces of evidence painted a vastly different picture of Bradley Thompson than his polished public persona. In reality, he was an abuser of authority, fostering a culture of fear and deliberate discrimination, ready to crush anyone challenging his power or personal preferences. Jessica and her advisors compiled the evidence into a comprehensive dossier. Every detail was meticulously documented, every testimony rigorously verified. At the same time, Jessica crafted a transparent, strategic media outreach plan, fully determined to reverse Bradley's narrative assault. But pressure mounted. Through his shadow network, Bradley learned of her moves and launched covert sabotage, veiled threats, attempted bribes, and harassment calls, even death threats, to key witnesses. Yet Jessica stood firm. She assured her witnesses' safety, and, in a closed-door meeting with her legal team, declared, "The more Bradley presses us, the more he shows his fear. We will not stop until every truth is laid bare. I intend to take this public, in the media and the courtroom. Bradley Thompson will be fully accountable for his actions against me and so many others." Jessica knew her battle was no longer just about herself or corporate pride. It was a fight for justice, for the dignity of all who had been oppressed by Bradley Thompson's authoritarian rule. And she was determined to carry it through to victory, not only for herself, but for everyone watching and waiting for real justice. The moment Jessica stepped into the courtroom, she immediately felt the icy glare of Bradley Thompson, seated confidently beside his team of high-powered lawyers. Even more unsettling was the oddly genial expression on Judge Robert Harrington's face, the same Judge Harrington who would decide the fate of her case today. From whispers among courtroom lawyers, Jessica already knew that Judge Harrington and Bradley were longtime friends, regularly seen together at exclusive golf outings. But she never expected him to display such blatant bias before a room full of onlookers and press. The hearing opened with Jessica's attorney presenting her evidence clearly and comprehensively. Every recording, every sworn affidavit, from Emily Stevens, Marcus Hall, and Julie Chen, painted Bradley Thompson as an abusive, racist leader who threatened subordinates to serve his own ends. Yet each time her lawyer finished a critical piece of evidence, Judge Harrington swiftly found a pretext to dismiss it. He would cut them off with remarks like, "This evidence lacks sufficient legal weight," or "The court cannot accept these recordings as they may have been altered." Jessica realized that Harrington wasn't merely showing favoritism. He was actively shielding Bradley in open court. Every so often he glanced at Bradley, sharing subtle but loaded looks that sent a chill down Jessica's spine as she grasped the depth of the scheme she faced. Meanwhile, Bradley's lawyers exploited the judge's obvious partiality to dismantle Jessica's arguments. Bradley himself even rose to speak directly to the court, his calm demeanor almost chilling. "I fail to understand why Ms. Carter would levy such baseless accusations. This is clearly a campaign to defame me personally and damage SkyWest Airlines." After each assertion, Jessica could see Bradley's confident smirk. He was convinced the victory was already in his hands. Tension in the courtroom mounted. The press in the gallery furiously took notes and recorded, all sensing the judge's unusual rulings. But no one dared call him out without hard proof of his relationship with Bradley. Finally, when Jessica rose to address the court herself, she steadied her voice with calm resolve. "Your Honor Harrington, I have faith in the judiciary's fairness and objectivity. However, what has transpired today forces me to question the impartiality of these proceedings. I respectfully request that the court re-examine all evidence more thoroughly." Judge Harrington cut her off immediately, his tone icy and authoritative. "Ms. Carter, this court will not tolerate you questioning my fairness. I suggest your counsel remind you of proper courtroom decorum." Jessica clenched her fists, fully aware of Bradley's triumphant gaze. The hearing was adjourned for further review of supplemental materials, but Jessica knew this was merely a stalling tactic intended to shake her confidence and derail her lawsuit. Determined not to let matters stand, she quietly assembled a team of private investigators to dig into the true nature of Bradley Thompson and Judge Harrington's relationship. Within days, the investigators uncovered compelling proof of collusion. Photos of Harrington and Bradley dining at private golf clubs, unusual transfers through covert bank accounts, and, most damningly, email exchanges in which Bradley explicitly requested that Harrington take care of Ms. Carter's lawsuit once and for all. Holding these revelations, Jessica felt a mixture of anguish and righteous anger. She realized this legal battle had grown far beyond a personal grievance. It was a fight against an entrenched system of favoritism and corruption. In a closed-door strategy session with her legal team, Jessica declared firmly, "We will not bow to this injustice and bias. I intend to make public every piece of evidence of this scheme between Bradley Thompson and Judge Harrington. I want the press and the authorities to investigate thoroughly." Jessica understood the grave risks of this move, but more than anything she recognized she was speaking for those who had never had a voice, people oppressed and manipulated by the unseen power of figures like Bradley and Harrington. She resolved, more resolutely than ever, that she would not back down until true justice prevailed, not just for her own honor, but for the principle of fairness that everyone deserves. After days of relentless tension and pressure, the moment arrived for Jessica to strike her decisive blow. At a press conference held in her lawyer's offices, she stood before dozens of cameras and microphones, her gaze unwavering. No longer the wronged and oppressed woman, Jessica now embodied the powerful symbol of justice and truth. "I stand before you today, not as a victim," Jessica's strong voice echoed through the room, "but as a representative for all who have endured injustice, discrimination, and abuse of power at the hands of people like Bradley Thompson." With that, she unveiled the rock-solid, irrefutable evidence her team had painstakingly gathered over the past weeks. In front of the assembled reporters and attorneys, secret recordings began to play, each chilling snippet illuminating Bradley's calculated scheme. Bradley's cold, arrogant voice rang out unmistakably, "Emily, you must say that Jessica was the one causing trouble and refused to cooperate on that flight. If you don't blame me for what happens to you." Journalists fell silent, stunned by the blatant threat. Jessica then disclosed private emails exchanged between Bradley and Judge Robert Harrington, emails in which Bradley explicitly instructed Harrington to suppress her court evidence. She didn't stop there. Jessica presented sworn statements from former SkyWest employees who had suffered systematic racism under Bradley's direct orders. Marcus Hall, Julie Chen, and others came forward, recounting the painful experiences inflicted by Bradley's ruthless authority. The media and public reaction was instantaneous and explosive. The recordings and emails Jessica released went viral, igniting an unprecedented wave of outrage. The hashtag #Bradley Exposed topped trending lists worldwide, with demands for immediate investigations directed at the FBI and other authorities. Just hours later, Bradley's door at SkyWest headquarters was thrown open by FBI agents bearing arrest and search warrants. Bradley, who had once considered his office an impregnable fortress, now stood pale as handcuffs were snapped onto his wrists. "Bradley Thompson, you are under arrest for evidence tampering, coercion, witness intimidation, and corruption," declared an FBI agent in a firm voice. Bradley struggled and shouted desperate protests, but there was no escape. Simultaneously, Judge Robert Harrington faced his own reckoning. Confronted by public fury and the airtight evidence Jessica had revealed, investigators moved swiftly. Harrington was summoned to an emergency hearing, and within hours was forced to resign in disgrace. At that hearing, Harrington weakly tried to defend himself. "Mr. Thompson and I are simply longtime friends. This is all a misunderstanding." But when investigators produced the damning emails documenting his collusion with Bradley, Harrington could only bow his head in silent panic. Later, Jessica stood in her office, quietly watching the collapse of Bradley and Harrington. She knew her battle had become a turning point, not just for her own cause, but for everyone who had lived in fear and silence under unchecked power. A powerful movement surged across the nation, demanding sweeping reforms in corporate culture and justice. SkyWest Airlines was compelled to convene an emergency meeting, vow a comprehensive internal investigation into the allegations of racism, and implement thorough corrective measures. Jessica exhaled in relief, knowing justice had finally prevailed. Yet she understood this was far more than a personal victory. It was a pivotal step toward transforming an entire system, ensuring that figures like Bradley Thompson could never again abuse their power. Gazing out her office window as the soft sunlight illuminated her determined face, Jessica resolved that the fight would continue. But deep in her soul, she believed unwaveringly, though justice may be hard-fought, it will always triumph in the end. As public outcry and investor pressure reached a fever pitch, SkyWest Airlines had no choice but to convene an emergency meeting to address the greatest crisis in its history. With Bradley Thompson's rapid downfall and Judge Harrington's complete disgrace, all eyes now turned to Walter Kingston, who had long willfully concealed and enabled the company's internal wrongdoing. In the grand boardroom at SkyWest's headquarters, the harsh white lights illuminated Walter Kingston's ashen face. His voice trembled, devoid of the confidence and authority he once exuded, as he faced shareholders and board members demanding clear answers. "I was completely unaware of Bradley's serious misconduct," Walter stammered weakly. "This was simply an unfortunate, unintended incident." But the documents released publicly just before the meeting had fully exposed his culpability. An elder board member, his tone cold and stern, replied, "Walter, we've all read the emails and internal reports. You not only knew about Bradley's actions, you directly approved discriminatory policies against minority employees. Don't embarrass us further." Silence fell as the other directors stared at Walter with grave disappointment. He realized the end had come. He had no choice but to step down. That very evening, an official announcement declared Walter Kingston's resignation as CEO of SkyWest Airlines, marking the bitter end of a controversial and deeply flawed tenure. SkyWest also pledged to undertake a comprehensive reform to eradicate the culture of racism that had long festered within the company. Just days later, the board named Sandra Reeves as the new CEO. A formidable leader renowned for her bold reforms in the aviation industry, Sandra was widely trusted by both the public and investors for her integrity and transparency. At her official inauguration, Sandra Reeves addressed the media with unwavering resolve. SkyWest Airlines will no longer tolerate any form of discrimination. I am committed to implementing bold, far-reaching changes to build a fair, equitable workplace for everyone. This is not only a promise to our investors, but a pledge to the community and to society as a whole. Sandra then invited Jessica Carter to join SkyWest's board in a pivotal role, overseeing and supporting the company's transformation. Initially taken aback, Jessica soon recognized the tremendous opportunity to drive meaningful change from within. At her first board meeting, Sandra spoke directly to the group. "I want everyone to understand that Jessica Carter is not merely a victim of past events. She is a courageous woman who stood against an unjust system. We need voices like hers on this board to ensure SkyWest never repeats these grave mistakes." Immediately, the new board, alongside Jessica, launched a company-wide reform campaign. Covert discriminatory practices were abolished, and aggressive, transparent anti-bias training programs were rolled out. Jessica personally attended meetings and conducted regular audits to ensure reforms were fully enforced with no compromise. Over the next few weeks, SkyWest's workplace culture transformed. Minority employees, who had once suffered in silence, now felt empowered to share their stories. Sandra Reeves organized open forums to encourage all staff to participate in rebuilding the company culture. Jessica stood by Sandra's side, earning admiration across the company for her steadfast determination. Formerly silent employees began meeting with Jessica to express deep gratitude and share their hopes for a brighter SkyWest future. Simultaneously, SkyWest announced a multi-million-dollar diversity fund to support hiring initiatives, promote equality, and provide opportunities for employees of all backgrounds. Under Jessica's direct oversight, this fund became a symbol of SkyWest's new commitment to right its past wrongs and build a fairer future. Sandra and Jessica also appeared regularly together in the media, transparently sharing progress and restoring public and investor confidence. Before long, SkyWest had begun to recover its reputation, once severely tarnished. In a speech to newly hired employees, Jessica spoke with heartfelt conviction. "What we've endured cannot be forgotten, but those experiences have made us stronger and more united. Today, SkyWest Airlines is not just an airline. It's a place where everyone deserves respect, equal opportunity, and dignity. That's what we strive for every day." Thunderous applause filled the room. Jessica knew that the hard-fought battle had ultimately sparked profound, lasting change. A triumph of justice, equality, and hope. In the months following SkyWest Airlines' sweeping overhaul, Jessica didn't rest on her laurels. She knew that her lawsuit against Bradley Thompson and SkyWest was just one battle in the long, ongoing fight against the deep-rooted racism that still plagues corporate America. This was only the beginning. With unwavering passion and resolve, Jessica committed a significant portion of her personal wealth to create the Corporate Justice Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to combating every form of discrimination in American business and providing legal and financial support to those who, like her, have suffered injustice. At the Foundation's debut gala in a large convention center, Jessica stood before hundreds of attendees, leading CEOs, social activists, and people who'd been marginalized by workplace bias, and spoke from the heart. "My case wasn't just personal. It represents the voices of millions of Black, Asian, Latino, and other minority Americans who have endured injustice in silence for far too long. Starting today, we're changing that, together." Almost overnight, the foundation captured widespread attention and support. Major corporations, feeling investor and public pressure, immediately reevaluated their hiring, promotion, and internal culture policies. Jessica's lawsuit became a landmark precedent, cited by civil rights groups and legal advocates nationwide in similar battles. Remarkably, within months, companies like Delta, American Airlines, and United Airlines publicly announced robust, transparent reforms to root out discrimination. Inspired by Jessica's courage, business leaders personally pledged to uphold accountability and inclusion. Meanwhile, under Sandra Reeves's leadership and Jessica's vigilant oversight, SkyWest completed its dramatic turnaround. The airline not only reclaimed its once damaged reputation, but emerged as a global model of diversity and equity in aviation. 1 year later, by an almost unanimous shareholder vote, Jessica was elected chair of SkyWest Airlines' board of directors. At her installation ceremony, Sandra presented her with a bouquet as staff, investors, and international media looked on. Standing before the board, Jessica felt the weight of her new role and the spark of hope in her eyes. "We've come through a difficult journey, and now SkyWest Airlines opens a new chapter. We will continue to lead the fight against injustice, not just in aviation, but across American business." In the months that followed, Jessica championed deep reforms at SkyWest, strengthening transparent, inclusive corporate culture, launching leadership training for employees of every background, and ensuring future executives reflected the company's diversity. Thanks to her tireless efforts, SkyWest quickly became synonymous with innovation and equality, earning top honors from independent organizations for workplace diversity and best practices. At the same time, the Corporate Justice Foundation grew into a powerful force, assisting hundreds of workers nationwide with legal aid to challenge workplace injustice. Jessica frequently addressed international forums, urging corporate social responsibility and inspiring a global movement for fairness. One summer afternoon, Jessica stood by her SkyWest office window on the top floor, gazing down at the bustling city below. She remembered that fateful flight, once a moment of personal pain that ultimately ignited a movement to transform an entire system. A deep sense of pride filled her. Her legacy wasn't just a famous court victory or the downfall of abusers like Bradley and Harrington. It was the lasting shift in public consciousness, a foundation upon which future generations could build. Jessica smiled softly, knowing the fight would never truly end, but confident that her efforts had made the world better than it was yesterday. And with that conviction, she vowed to meet every challenge ahead, continuing to fight for a fairer future for all. If you found this story inspiring and meaningful, please like and share this video with your friends and family. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories in the future. Thank you for listening. And remember, each of us has the power to create change for a more just society.